Welcome back to another episode of Fantastic Descriptions. I'm Neil Aiken, and on this channel we talk about the fine art of narrative storytelling as it takes place in Dungeons & Dragons and other role-playing games. More specifically, we look at description. How do we become better at describing different aspects of the game, whether it's combat encounters and combat narrative, or we're looking at room descriptions, which we talked a lot about in an earlier series. Or we're focused on villain entrances, character deaths, dramatic turns in combat, or moments of great role-playing and sort of their consequence or their aftermath. So today we're going to continue our discussion of combat description and look at basically 4 different approaches or styles that we might employ and use in our narrative storytelling. As we kind of frame and describe combat. So really there's 4 things to pay attention to, or 4 different styles, I guess you would say. One is sort of a reactive style, and that's a focus on what is the visible reaction in the target of an attack. So for instance, how this might work is I might describe in the course of combat, so player character rolls, hits, and I might say, you strike the one-eyed goblin with a mighty blow from your maul, staggering it for a moment. It grimaces, then spits in your face. So the focus here then is on portraying what happens as a result, the reaction, the physical, both the facial and also the emotive reaction of the target. Looking at how can that communicate back to the player and to the characters, how that attack was evaluated and responded to. So we think about combat then as sort of the physical action as being really more like a dialogue or a conversation. If I hit you, then you are visibly responding in some way to that attack. Likewise, if monsters strike my character, I'm going to be thinking about, what is it that I can represent here. So as a DM or GM, primarily we're looking at translating for the players how different people feel about what's happening. So you can think about both in terms of the physical reaction, visually what's happening in terms of the emotional, facial information, and then if there's a physical performance or action that they do in response. Something that's free, effectively, spitting in their face or grimacing or laughing. All those things are free, but they help build sort of a dramatic intensity to this moment. So the second approach or style for narration that we're going to look at is what I would call a consequential or cause and effect. So here we're thinking about what is the physical result or the visible result of someone's action. And this might then impact not just the target, but also the physical environment around them. You strike the wild-eyed goblin with a mighty blow from your maul. There's a sickening crunch, and its whole body shudders from the impact. So here, what's important then is to focus on what is the result or the effect of a particular attack. Instead of the reaction, now we're looking at sort of physically, how is that attack manifested, translated onto the body or onto the physical world. So you might have another instance where, the same attack strikes someone, maybe they crit, and the blow sends the target backwards, reeling and bouncing off the wall or impaled into some spike or falling from the cliff, whatever it is. But you can create a result, a consequence to that blow. Okay, number 3 is something I call cinematic rephrasing. And I usually reserve this as a way of handling a series of actions that then get translated into sort of a scene that I carve out. And I would say this tends to happen if you have a group or a squad of monsters who are performing some sort of concentrated or coordinated attack, and then the party is making a set of saves, or there's some larger like effect, environmental effect, and they make a set of saves. In this case, I would often take this and translate the scene after all the rolls. And I might say, let's say there's an ambush. A volley of arrows flies out from the shadows at the back of the room. They rain down all around you. You and Yasmira manage to duck out of the way, but Grognar is struck by 3 of them. So here I can take sort of a series of rolls that have been made, and 2 of the characters manage to make their saves. They duck out of the way. One of them fails and is impaled by 3 of the arrows, right? And so, but I've created a whole scene around that. Instead of the arrows miss you, you get hit 3 times, is not as exciting as a scene which carves out and crafts, sort of a cinematic scene, a dramatic moment that then pushes on to the rest of the combat. You don't want to make so many cinematic scenes within a combat that you drag out the whole thing, but you do want to use it if there's like an important change in the environment, or there's a dramatic turn. If you have a boss monster that has some sort of lair action or sort of legendary action, take advantage of those things to make sort of a cinematic scene out of it. It feels more like a boss fight at that point. And the 4th and final one is the idea of a panoramic zoom, or a panoramic shot. So that's basically to say, sometimes when we're describing a combat, we might actually want to pull out, zoom out, and see a bigger picture. And this, I would say, tends to happen in at least two different situations. One might be if your combat is really part of a much larger combat. Let's say you have a tactical force that's part of a larger effort to conquer a castle. And in that case, that means that if you're successful in your tactical objective, then this results in a cascading effect that influences the rest of the combat. So you might stop and the combat at this particular moment and then zoom out and see sort of this cascading effect as this happens. You kill sort of the lead monster over an entire sort of invading force. Kill that boss, kill that captain or that general. Then that has a cascading effect, and so you can pull out and you can see that cascading effect as the morale is broken, as monsters start to flee, or as they're reinvigorated and they move forward. And you see sort of a shift, a tidal shift in sort of what's happening in the combat. The other way to thinking about this is sort of the end of a combat or an environmental shift in which the terrain has changed because of something that's happened. So the example that I kind of put together is one where, let's see, you have sort of this moment where in killing someone, you've also triggered something else. You watch as Grognar crushes the skull of the goblin champion, and as it falls lifeless, you see the rest of the goblins tremble in fear. A few of their warriors rush towards you, but the rest flee. You feel a tremor beneath your feet, and suddenly the earth gives way, revealing a gigantic chasm of impossible depth. Something large moves almost imperceptibly in the darkness of the void. And so you get a signal that the terrain has changed, that maybe there's a new threat appearing, but you've pulled out to see a bigger picture. And that, I think, is really great in sort of a battle where there's something epic about to happen or that is happening. And you want to do that to signal, okay, here we're going into a new transition. We're going into something that will require you to refocus your energy and refocus your attention on a different set of monsters or a new set of targets. So once again, reactive, which is focused on sort of physical reaction and emotion coming from the target. Consequence, or cause and effect, which is really, what does the miss or the hit do to the target's body or to the environment? So like you smack down someone with such mighty force that the whole ground produces tremors and shakes, or like you break through a wall. You see this all the time in old Hollywood movies where you'd have these bar fights and then they'd start smashing through the walls and breaking tables and things like that. So you get the sense that that cause and effect thing is constantly happening. Cinematic rephrasing is just taking a little cutscene, really crafting a little cutscene out of a particular moment, but it's still focused on summarizing a set of actions or a set of saves and repackaging them in such a way that it's a little scene that people can enjoy before they refocus. And then a panoramic zoom out is really kind of reserved for like an epic moment where you want to see the consequence of the action, its ripple or cascade effect over a larger body or over a larger scene, or there's a dramatic change in the terrain in a way that you wouldn't see at first without zooming out. So these are the four main things that I would focus on. We're going to continue in the next episode talking about how can we make our attack and miss descriptions more interesting without bogging down combat, because I think this is one that we really struggle a lot with. A lot of times I've played in games, I've even been that DM where you kind of just drop to the point where you're just doing, you hit, you miss, you hit, you miss, a 14 hits, a 14 misses. And for certain combats it's okay, but sometimes you just want more. But you also don't want it to be like a paragraph long description of combat. We don't need a cutscene for every single blow. What we want is a fast-paced but fresh, interesting look at combat. And so we're going to look at how to do that and how to take inspiration really on the fly from just looking at a few details that we get from looking at the monster description and the monster stats and the player's description, player stats, and then run. So we'll be back soon with that. Thank you for sticking around. If you enjoyed this episode, please like this video, subscribe to this channel, check back often. I try to have new content up. Well, I've been trying to do it every 2 weeks at this point. But in any case, there'll be new content, new video up as soon as I can. I'm also working on translating these things into a book format so that it will be available at some point this year. Through Drive-Thru RPG and other places. So until then, check back often, rewatch some of the old videos, and let me know if there are new topics or other things that you would like me to focus on. And until next time, stay safe, stay well, keep rolling dice.